we good to go? Perfect. And is everyone able to see my screen okay? Head nods. Perfect. Excellent. Well, I know we're right on the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. We may have a few more folks trickle in, but as Kim shared a few moments ago, the recording or the call will be recorded for others to go back and look at in the future if needed. Thank you so much for joining us. I know it's that busy time of year. We've got people on vacation. We've got upward bound students on campus. We've got camps happening on campus. People just trying to get their lives together before the fall semester. At least I know that's where myself and our office are. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Nathan Farner. He, him, his pronouns, and I serve as coordinator for leadership and civic engagement in the Division of Student Life and Enrollment. If you're not familiar with our office, Leadership and Civic Engagement, we serve as a hub on campus for community service programming, peer-to-peer diversity education, leadership development, and voter engagement efforts for our students, student organizations, and the broader campus community as a whole. So very excited for you all to join us today. Before we get started, I kind of want to know who's in the space. So if you're able to use the chat, I'd love for you to just drop in the chat. You're a faculty member, staff member, student, other, are you a guest from off campus? I don't know. Feel free to drop it in the chat. We'd just love to know who's kind of in the conversation with us as we get started. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about our goals for today. Obviously, we're going to talk about civic engagement and diversity, equity, and inclusion. But the starting place for that, of course, is you need to know what civic engagement is. So I want to spend a little bit of time defining civic engagement. I want to spend some time visualizing the relationship between DEI and civic engagement. I want to talk a little bit about what those look like in actuality. How do you actually put those into practice and show some real examples? And then I want to talk a little bit more about how you can plug in or tap into some of those resources, civic engagement resources and opportunities here on campus. There'll be some dedicated time throughout for some discussion here and there, and then, of course, some dedicated time for questions at the end. With that, though, I know some people, if you have an urgent question, you're really excited, you want to share it, feel free to go ahead and drop it in the chat. Joy Fulkerson, who also works in my office, serves as director for leadership and civic engagement, is going to kind of help me monitor those, and she'll uplift any super relevant questions if they're very timely as well. But we will have some dedicated time at the end for that as well. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. And what is a good webinar without an initial prompt? So I would love to know from those on the call, what is civic engagement? This could be an example, it could be a definition, it could be a simple word or a phrase. But when I use the phrase civic engagement, what comes to mind? What kind of images or pictures or thoughts come to mind? Feel free to just drop those in the chat. Love to see kind of where folks are coming from, where your heads are at in terms of civic engagement. Okay, lots of good ones coming in already. Community impact, very good. It certainly is. Interest and involvement in the community, very good. Volunteer work, excellent. Involvement in the community, community involvement. Very good. Community and volunteering, group activities, addressing issues of public concern. I like it. I like it. That's great. Any other kind of themes or thoughts or images arise for folks when we talk about civic engagement? I'll give it another couple of seconds in case anybody else wants to jump in. Something related to local government, perhaps. Very good. I love the question mark. Yes, I agree. To answer your question, I think it does. That's great. Very good. Nonprofits, absolutely, absolutely. Very good. So all of your answers, and feel free to keep dropping those in as they pop up. But yes, all of those things are correct. Civic engagement is all of that and more. One of the things that when we use the term civic engagement, you all may have heard lots of different phrases kind of used interchangeably: community engaged learning, volunteering, community service, service learning, and a plethora of other terms and phrases and names of offices and programs and classes and courses and books and lectures and any number of things related to this kind of work. For those of us working in the civic engagement realm, there are some slight nuances and differences to a lot of these things. But for the purposes of today's conversation, I really want to kind of take the most broad level definition that is somewhat all inclusive of all of those things you see on the screen. And a lot of you were hitting at it in that last chat session. But really, it's that emphasis on community, that emphasis on tackling an issue of some kind, right? So something to do with community and something to do with tackling or addressing an issue of some kind. Now, obviously, when you start getting into the weeds of these different terms, you have questions about, is something worth course credit or not? Is something paid or not? Is it an individual or is it with a team? All of those things, of course, are kind of in the weeds and nuances. But for today's conversation, we're really talking this kind of high level understanding of civic engagement as a person or a group of people engaging with the community in some capacity to address a particular issue or set of issues. So very broad definition that is a little bit all inclusive. So want to start off by thinking a little bit more and talking through what really is the relationship between diversity, equity, and inclusion and civic engagement broadly. Now, of course, I'm going to go ahead and add the caveat, which is likely common sense, but not everything within diversity, equity, and inclusion, or all topics related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, will fit a civic engagement model. Not everything will fit. Some things are purely informational, some things are purely educational, and that is okay. Not everything has to fit. And on the flip side of that, not all programs or topics within civic engagement are automatically going to tackle issues or topics related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So when I talk about civic engagement, for example, maybe we're actually talking about environmental issues, right? Environmental restoration, wetlands restoration, coastal work. We've done some experiences with our alternative breaks program around those sorts of topics. Those could certainly have a DEI lens, right? We could talk about environmental displacement. We could talk about environmental justice broadly in the communities that it impacts. But in and of itself, it doesn't necessarily have to be DEI, but it can be. So what I do want to talk about today, though, is what happens when those two things, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and civic engagement, overlap. What happens when you are able to strategically and intentionally pair the two together? And what impact does that have on students? What impact could that have on classes or other populations that you may be working with? What we commonly find is that civic engagement and diversity, equity, and inclusion are really often two sides of the same coin. Civic engagement can be a tremendous tool and resource for fostering DEI and uplifting diversity topics. That is often due to the ways in which civic engagement programming allows students to step out of their own space, to leave their comfort zone, get off of campus, get out of their dorm, perhaps get out of a classroom or out of a textbook even, and stepping directly into a community or a population that is being served. And we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly, but it really is that idea of stepping out of your own space and into someone else's, really taking somewhat of an empathetic and solidarity-focused approach. And like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But on the flip side of that coin, we often see civic engagement used as a way to put action behind DEI work. This commonly plays out in the form of a student or a group of students, a class of some kind, learning something from a DEI lens. This could be through a conference. This could be through some sort of student programming, something here on campus, a student org, maybe the Multicultural Center, or even in an academic course for course credit. So they're learning something from a DEI lens and then using civic engagement programming as a model or a way to explore and directly impact whatever that topic might have been. So it's moving from simply the knowledge and the information into some form of direct action. So I want to talk a little bit about those two pieces. So driving DEI action through civic engagement and then civic engagement as a tool for fostering DEI. I want to talk about those two sides of the coin, and I want to share some specific examples about some outcomes that a lot of students take away from civic engagement programming and how they directly tie to DEI work. So first and foremost, you can't talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion without talking about identity, right? It really is at the root of a lot of the work in and of itself. Not only the identity of others, but your own identities, the ways in which those identities intersect, the way they impact one another, the way they impact your life, and the way that the broader society is impacted or impacts your life based on the identities that you hold or possess. So in this photo, you will see a group of students and faculty members, former students, I will say. This is from 2019. I suspect, unless they're in grad school, most of these folks are now alums, and some former faculty and staff members as well. But they are standing in front of the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., as a part of one of our alternative spring break programs. This particular trip was called A Beautiful Mosaic. And as the name implies, it was an experience focused on religious pluralism and exploring religious spaces, religious backgrounds, and the ways in which religion and faith and belief systems of any kind impact people's societal understandings, their political behaviors, things like that. So I will pause there in case you're not familiar with what Alternative Breaks is broadly. Alternative Breaks is a program that exists on college and university campuses across the country. It has existed here on our campus for several decades now. But essentially, it is an opportunity for a group of students with a partnership with a faculty or staff learning partner to leave our region, to leave our community, like I shared a little bit earlier, to get out and to take a deep dive through service around a particular social, environmental, or economic issue. In this case, of course, thinking specifically more along the social justice route of things. But it's a chance for them to leave and take a deep dive in a distant city or location or region around a particular issue. They usually serve with nonprofits in that area. They're meeting with local leaders. They are meeting with the population and the folks that they're directly serving and they're impacted by their service. And they're really taking this fully immersive approach to looking at a particular issue from many different lenses, from many different angles, and the many different groups and organizations and entities that are involved in that work. So in this particular AB experience that I shared, these students traveled as a part of their AB experience to Washington, D.C. to explore religion and faith and belief in all of its many different capacities. Not only did they get a chance to serve with organizations and religious nonprofits in the community, in the DC metropolitan area, but they also got to attend some religious services from various different faith backgrounds, tour religious spaces, sit down and have conversations and meals with people from different faith backgrounds to just learn and engage and build a sense of connection and belonging and community with those individuals. One of the things that is amazing when we talk about exploring identity is the way in which students are able to reflect on the ways in which their beliefs or the belief systems they grew up in have informed other forms of their identity. So of course, when you're talking about faith, you're also talking about race. You're also talking about sexuality. You're also talking about your political affiliations and the socioeconomic status of which you grew up and the many ways that those items are connected. One of my favorite conversations that came from this particular experience is students had an opportunity as a part of this experience to engage in a little bit of personal identity exploration around their own faith and belief system. So students were in a room together with a large board words on a board, and there were columns on that board. And 3 questions were asked of each student. Where do you think we came from? What do you think our purpose is here in the world? And where do you think you go when we're gone? And students were invited one by one to get up and answer those 3 questions based on their own lived faith experience or what they grew up with. And what we noticed as students one by one started to get up is they all answered the first question, where do we come from? Very differently. They all answered the last question, where are we going? Very differently. But what we found fascinating, what was truly beautiful, is the answer for that middle question. What is our role or purpose on this planet? Almost every student from a variety of different backgrounds had roughly the same answer: to make the world a better place or to leave it better than when we got here. And for a lot of students, it was amazing hearing them share their thoughts and their emotions and their feelings in interacting with people from different backgrounds. For several folks, this was their first opportunity interacting with someone of a different faith background, and being able to see that play out in real time was very powerful and was a great opportunity for those students to explore their identities and the identities of one another. But you also can't talk about civic engagement without talking about understanding systems. So civic engagement is also an amazing tool for exploring and better understanding systems of all kinds, systems of power, privilege, oppression, the systemic nature of many of the social issues that we commonly discuss from a DEI lens. In this photo, you will see students participating in an Oxfam Hunger Banquet. If you're not familiar with Oxfam Hunger Banquet, it's a poverty simulation activity. ETSU has historically hosted one of these banquets on campus each year as a part of our National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Month each September. But essentially at this event, students walk in, they come for a meal as you would expect during a banquet. And as they enter into the venue, they're each given randomly a card. And that card tells them a little bit about their life in this simulation. And based on the card that they receive, it tells them where to sit and what meal they will be having for the remainder of the banquet. And what you will notice as you walk into the room is you've got cardboard on the ground. You've got cardboard with graffiti and garbage. And some students who are randomly selected as they're entering are put into the lower class and actually sit on the ground and share a bowl of rice, as you will see here in this photo. You've got some students who are born into a little bit of a higher class and are sitting in the middle class, and they have a table and have a little bit of bread and perhaps a protein. And then you've got a small, very small portion of students that as they enter are actually invited to sit on the stage where they have a full plated meal with a tablecloth table and servers there helping them. And throughout that simulation, as students are engaging and having conversations, they're looking around and they're exploring and learning about the ways in which a lot of the spaces that they are currently sitting weren't chosen by them, right? They hear stories from real world individuals throughout the simulation, farmers in different parts of the world, those growing up in different parts of the United States, the ways in which they have changed levels of socioeconomic status and the different factors that have impacted their lives. While the banquet itself is always kind of a sight to behold, it's always the discussion at the end with participants where you can truly see the impact of the activity. The first thing students commonly point out is how surreal it is to sit on a piece of cardboard on the ground and eat rice while their best friend is on the other side of the room at a decorated table with a full plated meal. Even though they walked in together, they entered through the same door, and the system, or in this case, the simulation, forced them into very different directions. And then this conversation often naturally navigates into a discussion on how to reform or dismantle and rebuild those systems that impact poverty. But of course, talking a little bit more about systems, you can't talk about systems without talking about equity and justice, specifically social justice. So civic engagement often leads to opportunities to explore equity and justice in the real world and how real organizations and people are working to dismantle systems of oppression. In many cases, civic engagement gives students an opportunity to explore how you can change a system while also operating within that same system, a struggle that a lot of students often face. In this particular photo, this is another alternative break experience from this past spring. A group of students traveled to Nashville to explore women's health and health equity broadly for those underprivileged communities. And throughout this opportunity, they had an opportunity to serve with a variety of different organizations. In this particular photo, you will see Project Cure, where they packed healthcare baskets or boxes that would go to community clinics in need. But they also got to work with an organization called the Tennessee Justice Center, or TJC for short. Almost 30 years ago, Congress placed restrictions on legal service programs, effectively creating somewhat of a two-tier justice system. Community and bar leaders throughout the state joined together across the political ideologies and spectrum to form a new organization called the Tennessee Justice Center. And as the name implies, this organization operating out of Nashville really works to address gaps in services from the state and federal government, whether they be legal gaps, financial and economic gaps, education gaps, or in case of this particular experience, healthcare gaps. So through the alternative break program, students were able to assist with and directly engage in the work of filling that gap. And again, in this instance, related to healthcare. What was particularly even more meaningful about this specific experience were that several of the individuals you see in this photo were actually on a pre-med track. So many of them shared how eye-opening the experience was for them, especially considering that they will be active participants in the system one day, right, in the healthcare system, meaning that the power they have to affect positive change on or around those issues is even greater. One participant after the event shared that, I think ASB trips should be a requirement for health-related majors. As someone going into public health, it is essential for me to understand these issues and systems if I'm to have any chance of being able to affect positive change on them. So a really, really powerful statement from a student who just participated in one of these trips this past spring. But these are just a few examples. You can see how civic engagement is an excellent outlet for students to explore topics related to diversity, equity, and inclusion outside of the classroom. But we also want to talk a little bit about the ways in which civic engagement is an outlet for action. So as we discussed earlier, civic engagement can serve as an outlet for taking action on topics related to DEI broadly. In our office, we often describe it as moving simply from passion to action, The first step we always highlight in that process is the importance and value of identifying root causes to whatever social issue or barrier students are trying to tackle. We're actually seeing this process play out this summer as a part of our ETSU Elevates initiative. If you're not familiar with ETSU Elevates, it's a program that the university launched just before the pandemic in 2019 as a way for the university to invest financial resources back into organizations and nonprofit agencies in our region, tackling some of our region's biggest challenges. Of course, they got that off the ground. COVID happened and we put a little pause on it. But this summer, we officially kickstarted ETSU Elevates 2.0, if you will. And we have a group of students that this summer are actually doing this exact work. They're spending time taking a deep dive virtually throughout the summer term, exploring the root causes of a variety of different issues, trying to identify particular stakeholders in those issues and figuring out how those issues play out in our region. This summer, we have students with personal or family connections to issues such as incarceration, LGBTQ plus equality, immigration, and many others participating in the ETSU Elevate Summer Intensive. Students will be challenged to think about the topics, not only from their own lived experiences, but will be challenged to dig a little deeper and explore the root causes of these topics and the direct impact they have had in the Appalachian Highlands region and beyond. Through many civic engagement initiatives, students also have an opportunity to gain some real-world experience in building and working with coalitions of both people and organizations to tackle and address real-world problems. Last year, as you'll see in the photo, an alternative break team traveled to Memphis, Tennessee to explore food insecurity from the lens of the organizations and partners doing the work in that region. Not only did students directly serve with local organizations, but they also were able to explore the many different sides and angles and factors contributing to hunger in the Memphis area. So in meeting and serving with soup kitchens, food pantries, and even in that particular experience, the local transportation division, students were able to get a clearer picture of how each of these organizations are tackling the same specific issue, but doing it from a very different direction, point of reference, and lens. In this particular photo, it's actually a great photo. It's a little grainy, so I apologize. But the AV team is actually out delivering burritos on bicycles to those in need in the downtown Memphis area in partnership with a local agency. One of the things that they found in Memphis is that transportation or a lack of transportation or transportation access was one of the primary contributing factors to a lot of hunger challenges in the Memphis metropolitan area. So here they're actually on bicycles as well. They have helmets on delivering burritos, which I know was quite an interesting experience for those students on that trip. And last but certainly not least, you can't talk about DEI work without emphasizing the power of a person's voice and supporting students in developing their sense of agency as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In this particular photo, this is a photo taken from the Tennessee Intercollegiate State Legislature, or TISL for short. TISL is a statewide nonprofit organization that invites colleges, universities, both public, private, 2- and 4-year institutions from across the state of Tennessee to come together in Nashville and do a form of mock government or mock legislature. Students actually propose bills that they have written and researched. They propose those bills, they get to debate them, argue them in front of committee, they get to argue them on the floor, vote on them. And then many of those bills that are very strong and that students have some unanimous support around actually get passed on to the real state legislature for consideration during that next legislative session. TISL often allows students to explore and impact policy that in turn impacts them, the communities they live in, or the issues that they care about. A specific example, and I actually had a chance to attend TISL with these students, but in 2017, 2 students from Maryville College, one being a member of the deaf community, presented legislation at TISL to allow ASL, American Sign Language, to meet Tennessee schools' foreign language requirement. And conducting research, building their case, uplifting the impact it would have on the state as a whole, presenting that bill at TISL, and then it moving forward. That bill, again, written by 2 Tennessee college students, actually became state law later that year. And now ASL is actually recognized as meeting the foreign language requirement in the state of Tennessee. So Lots of amazing opportunities to support students in recognizing that they have agency in a lot of these conversations that we're having around DEI, that they have opinions, that they have voices, and that those voices matter and are impactful, and giving them outlets to uplift and share those voices in a formal capacity. I want to pause there before we come back together a little bit, and I want to invite you all to feel free to unmute yourself, and I'll minimize the screen so we can see one another. But just from where we're at so far, I'm curious to know if you see any ways in which civic engagement work could be used in your own DEI work, or if you have experience with civic engagement already, if you have some examples about how you have used it. So feel free to unmute yourself and share. I'd love to open up a conversation for a few minutes before we dive back in. Anybody like to kickstart us? I know we've got folks on the call with some civic engagement experience.
Nathan, you may want to change your screen. We can see your calendar.
Oh, perfect. Yes, let's not do that.
You're a busy guy.
Very good.
You looked real busy.
Any examples, or anybody who maybe hasn't had experience with civic engagement that may know of some ways that maybe they could potentially implement it in the work that they're doing?
Well, I have a little bit of experience in something which I'm not sure if it's included in civic engagement, but I used to live in England as a student, and I went to grammar schools, and they were like diverse, and I taught Indian classical music to these little kids, and then they all kind of, learn each other's music, and then they performed. So that was one of the things when they kind of knew about each other. Then I was from the Trinity College of London, I was a part of this production that we did, and students from different countries came together, and they made the entire production from scratch. And that was like a fusion of all kinds of arts, and we presented that to council, and that kind of, made a lot of difference.
Very good. Thank you for sharing. No, I definitely think that would be an example of community engagement or community engaged learning broadly, especially, that general criteria we talked about at the beginning, right? Simply solving a problem or addressing a need in partnership with community. So I think it's a great example. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. The best part in that was like when we came together at the beginning, it felt like we all are so different, and then we started making that production, giving inputs, and we kind of had the fusion of the ideas and ours. And, one person picked one piece and put it there, and another person picked up from a different culture, and it became like a multicultural production, which was altogether very beautiful. And by the end of it, we helped each other, learn the steps or sing the notes or do something or go with the story or rap. So it all became like, at the end of it, it seemed like we were the bouquet of flowers, but at the beginning we were all so different. But by the end of it, I learned a few new things, and everybody did.
Very good. Thank you. Any others? Anybody not have experience with civic engagement think that it might have some capacity in the work that they're doing, or have some opportunities for partnership there? Lots of folks on the screen. I know somebody's got an idea.
I know there have been conversations around possibly incorporating this type of work in the general education redesign. So, there's a lot of kind of big picture, systemic kind of possible changes on the academic side. And so I'm certainly an advocate of that, a proponent of that, just given my own academic background, both on the undergrad and the grad side, graduate school side. I think the hands-on application, getting outside of the classroom, is a super meaningful part of a person's college journey, not just in figuring out whether they like what they're doing and the track they're on, academic and career-wise, but just in gaining a greater understanding of where they fit in and what their interests are beyond their time in college.
Very good. Thank you. Any others? Susan, I don't want to put you on the spot, Dr. McCracken. Do you want to, I've got a slide a little bit later that I'll share about the QEP, but do you care to just briefly kind of mention for those on the screen that may not know, especially around the QEP as it relates to like target populations and some of the DEI work in that regard?
Yeah, sure. And actually, as you were asking your first question, I was just thinking about how ETSU Elevates is really celebrating so much. So there's so many opportunities to celebrate DEI in that work, not only the topics of the students that they've selected, but those students themselves. In fact, I realized one of them is someone I had met last year, and I'm just really excited that he's going to be a part of ETSU Elevate. So for those of you whom I've not met, and there are a lot of new faces on this call, I realized as I was looking at the participants, I'm Susan McCracken. I am the Vice Provost for Community Engagement and the Director for the Quality Enhancement Plan, which you've probably heard or seen that go beyond the classroom videos and marketing materials. And that is our 5-year quality enhancement plan to really expand our community engaged learning opportunities and experiences for students. And as a part of that plan, we recognize that there are, well, we knew this, but we really wanted to be intentional and thoughtful about 3 groups of students, 3 populations of students for whom their retention and graduation rates are below the average here on campus. And those of you who are involved in Moonshot and the Gen Ed reform know these statistics well. Those are our students who are male, our students who are receiving a Pell grant, so our Pell recipient students, and our students that we define through institutional research here at ETSU as underserved, which are generally speaking, our students of color, African-American students, Hispanic students, Native American students. So as a part of the QEP, one aspect that we want to be thoughtful about is how do we make sure that these community engaged learning experiences are attractive to all students. The research shows, the data show that there is a predominance of women who are engaged in service learning and civic engagement projects, and that those students tend to be from upper to middle income families. And that's not all the students on our campus. So we want to make sure that we are creating opportunities for those 3 target populations. And one of the initiatives that, and actually I was actually working on an email earlier this morning about this, is we would love folks who might be interested in really thinking about, okay, how can we make sure that community engaged learning is reaching our male students? If that is a population that you would really like to focus in on and work on some strategies and working with students on that, as well as other faculty and staff, then please send me an email, because those are 3 groups that we would like to launch this summer to be more focused on strategies around the retention and graduation as it's related to community engagement for those students. So was that helpful or what you expected, Nathan?
That was perfect.
Okay.
It was more than I expected. That was wonderful. Very good. Any other thoughts? Any other ways that folks have incorporated civic engagement or see it playing out in relation to DEI in their spaces or their work in some capacity? Okay, and if not, then I'll jump back. Oh, Joy, you unmuted yourself.
I just, and you may bring this up a little later, but again, I think through some of our work in the ETSU Votes initiative, of course, we're able to know individuals who are voting, who are participating in our democracy and who aren't. And for us, I think, thinking about that as in terms of those who are most impacted by some of the decisions that elected officials make. So we can use that as ways to also encourage participation.
And and to add some clarification, because I'm going to anticipate that I'll get an email or a question later. We know that people are voting. We do not know who they vote for. That is a question we get a lot. We do know who votes. We just don't know who they vote for. So I'll go ahead and preemptively answer that question before I get a couple of those. So, okay. And with that, I will go ahead and share my screen again here. Give me just a moment. Okay, and are you all able to see my screen again? Very good. Excellent. So wanting to talk a little bit more about what these look like on our campus, on ETSU's campus, specifically in case something that I shared earlier maybe kind of made a connection, it rang some bells and you thought, that might work in my office or with the students I work with, or maybe there's some partnership opportunity or ways to build out some new initiatives. I want to share some specific initiatives that are managed through our office and then some other outlets outside of our office as well that I would love to connect with folks on. If any of these seem like a natural fit, please feel free to reach out afterwards and we can try to navigate some of those conversations. The first one is Volunteer ETSU. If you're not familiar with Volunteer ETSU, it's a student organization that is housed within our office that has been around for several years now, but is really focusing on education and professional development around service. So what they focus on is supporting students in being better volunteers, right? So it's beyond just going out and giving up a couple of hours on a Saturday at a soup kitchen or a food pantry, but it's also about learning from that experience. It's about reflecting, taking something away from it, being able to see yourself in connection to that larger system and asking those questions that we talked about a little bit earlier. So they do a lot of education events, a lot of professional development events around social issues, and that's through Volunteer ETSU. So if you feel the need that perhaps you want a session led with a particular group of people or with an office or department or an organization that you work with to talk through some of these and maybe how you can even build DEI work into some of the work that you're already doing from a service lens, please feel free to reach out. That seems like a natural connection for those sorts of inquiries. Alternative breaks, which we talked about a lot, and I shared a little bit more about earlier. One avenue of alternative breaks that I briefly mentioned, but I'll hit on a little heavier, is that there is a faculty and staff component to alternative breaks. As I mentioned earlier, alternative breaks is usually a group of students, anywhere from 8 to 10, sometimes a few more. But there's always a faculty, staff, or sometimes, if it's a right fit, a graduate assistant that serves as staff support on those experiences. The goal for those staff support, faculty, staff, or GA individuals is really that they're offering some sort of expert knowledge or bringing something to the table in that regard. So if you're a faculty member or staff member in the School of Public Health, for example, and we're doing an AB experience around health, it would make sense that maybe we want someone who has a little bit more inside knowledge and can offer some context around the issues to actually go on those experiences with the students, to help students navigate those heavy conversations, to offer dialogue and to offer some insight from the inside on what that work actually looks like. So lots of opportunities for alternative breaks. I think it's one of the premier programs within our office and definitely has a lot of potential in terms of being able to kind of customize it and move it in a direction that really tackles specific issues. One thing about alternative breaks that people often ask is, how do we select the topics? How are the experiences created? They're, for the most part, created and selected by students. Students play a very active role in identifying topics that they want to explore, recruiting other students who are interested in those topics, making those connections, identifying the location that is best suited for addressing or tackling that topic. So if you're a student on the call who maybe has a particular issue area that you are very passionate about related to DEI, that you want to learn a little bit more about, that you want to kind of take a deep dive into, alternative breaks would be a great outlet to do that. And I would say the same for faculty and staff members. If you would deem yourself an expert in some capacity around a particular topic, and maybe you want to help support a group of students in traveling outside of our region for an extended period of time to address that topic kind of hands-on in a very meaningful, impactful, and immersive way, alternative breaks would be a great opportunity to do that. Anything, Joy, you would want to add on AB before I move ahead?
No, thanks. They are some of my favorite experiences that we offer here on campus for students, and really as a faculty or staff learning partner equally. You're learning alongside those students and participating with them, and would just welcome the opportunity to talk more with you about how you might be able to support that program. Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you. So moving a little bit forward, a little bit more, Joy mentioned this just a few minutes ago, but going back to this idea of using your voice and uplifting through advocacy, through voter engagement, through policy research, we really have two outlets here on campus that students can do that in a more formal capacity. One of those that Joy already mentioned is ETSU Votes. ETSU Votes is the university's official voter engagement initiative. It engages students, faculty, staff, and even more recently, the broader community in having those conversations, those political conversations, if you will, and trying to invite candidates to campus, elected officials, engaging students in the voter process directly, whether that be registering students to vote, as well as offering students outlets to vote efficiently and in an accessible manner. For those that may not know, ETSU was the first college campus in the state of Tennessee to actually serve as an early voting site. This past election cycle, which we're very excited about, is the accessibility that we've been working to address for students for the last several years, and we're able to finally make it happen in partnership with our local election commission. And this upcoming 2024 election cycle, ETSU will be serving as an election day site as well. So individuals that are registered to vote in Washington County, that's students, faculty, staff, and the general public, will have an opportunity to vote here on campus at the Brinkley Center, formerly known as the Millennium Center. So a great avenue and a great way to encourage students, of course, to use that agency and to use those beliefs and kind of move from that passion to action. For students that do have some sort of an interest in really looking at the policy components, the high-level systemic connections behind some of these DEI topics, TISL is a program that I would highly recommend. Applications for TISL will traditionally open in the fall. And they'll apply, they try to pick a diverse selection of students to travel to Nashville. But as a part of that process, as I shared earlier, those students will have a chance to pick a topic, any topic that they really care about, and take a deep dive into research on that topic, both in terms of public policy, the impact it has on our state and region and the people who live here. They'll be able to write legislation, mock legislation to present at TISL. They'll debate that legislation in front of their peers and in front of committees and elected officials at the state level, and actually be able to stand in the Tennessee Capitol and advocate and use their voice around that particular policy position. And as I shared earlier, those bills that really do have a lot of teeth and that really are impactful, have the potential to have a significant impact on the state, commonly do get moved forward and often become state law. So it is an amazing opportunity. It has been life-changing for a lot of students. I myself had an opportunity to participate in TISL all 4 years of my undergrad, and it's an amazing opportunity. So if that has a natural connection, maybe to a class that you're teaching or to a student you're working with or a student group, to explore the systemic nature of some of these DEI topics, that is an avenue that I would highly recommend. And then two more that I want to mention for those that maybe want to focus a little bit more on addressing social barriers here in our own region. One platform that I want to mention is ETSU Serves. ETSU Serves is an online digital platform that anyone with an ETSU email has access to. So all students, faculty, and staff have access to. It's a platform where students can actually, faculty or staff can search for volunteer service opportunities based on issue area. So I, as a student, faculty, or staff member, could log in, could say that I'm available Tuesday and Thursday afternoons after 6 p.m. And I really want to work on issues around race, or I really want to work on issues around education equity. And it will bring up organizations in the broader Appalachian Highlands region that have service opportunities in those particular areas. The platform also has opportunities for students to track those hours and to do some recognition and kind of monitor the work that they're doing, the impact that they're having in a region as a whole. And then we mentioned this a little bit earlier, and then Dr. McCracken mentioned it again, but it's ETSU Elevates, which we are in full force. Their first session is actually this evening for their summer cohort. But ETSU Elevates is an opportunity for students to really take a deep dive into a particular social, environmental, or economic issue. Obviously, a lot of DEI overlap and components and potential in that regard. But what's amazing about ETSU Elevates is it's more than just a leadership development opportunity. It actually is an opportunity to develop and secure funding for a project. So as a part of ETSU Elevates, students that are participating currently will be guaranteed some seed funding to help get their projects off the ground. And then later on in the fall, first week of October, we'll actually have an opportunity to publicly present and share their ideas in partnership with nonprofit agencies in order to secure additional funding to make those ideas and those projects become a reality. So each issue elevates is something that'll be around for the foreseeable future on a yearly basis. So I definitely encourage you, if you're a faculty or staff member, or you know students that you think would be a good fit, to definitely keep them in mind as a way for them to, again, move from passion to action. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Go Beyond the Classroom, which Dr. McCracken mentioned earlier. Outside of our office, related to our new ETSU's new quality enhancement plan, there is a variety of community engagement and civic engagement initiatives taking place for faculty, staff, and students at all levels across the campus community. Some of those have already launched. You will continue to see more in the coming months and years. So lots of opportunities to continue to engage with the community around social issues. And I definitely hope you all will take advantage of those. And I've dropped the link there for folks that may want to tap into some of those opportunities as well. And then last, but certainly not least, I want to share my information as well. Feel free to take a quick screenshot of this or take a photo of it on your phone if needed. But of course, my information is online as well. If any of the things that we've talked about today, you think you want to explore a little bit more, you want to have a side conversation about, and want to learn a little bit more about and how you can integrate it into the work that you're doing as a faculty member in the classroom, perhaps as a staff member in the work that you're doing, or as an organization you advise, or even if you want to directly get involved as a student, please feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to point you in the right direction and start those conversations. So with that, I'm going to end the slideshow and I'm just going to open it up for any general questions that folks might have, and we'll go from there.
I have a question.
Yes.
All right, how can I help as an international student? Does it restrict international student to be participating in any of these?
There is not. No, I believe we actually have ETSU Elevates, for example. I believe we actually have 2 international students on that cohort that's participating this summer. So yeah, there are no restrictions for any of those programs that I just mentioned. The only barrier that may exist, and it's a very soft barrier, is going to probably be on the voter engagement component. So
Gotcha.
if an international student, of course, by the nature of their voting status and their eligibility to vote, may be a little bit more limited on the ETSU Votes initiative in terms of their physical ability to register to vote and vote. But in terms of the education components of ETSU Votes, all of that would still remain. But no, everything is open to undergrad, grad students, and international students as well.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Absolutely. Great question. Any other questions about anything we've shared? That was a lot of information, very rapid, kind of rapid fire style, but hopefully you all, I'm hoping that everyone on the call at least maybe heard about one program or initiative today that maybe they didn't know about, or that maybe they could plug into, or that they could keep on their radar for the future. But like I said, civic engagement and DEI really do go hand in hand. There's a lot of potential to use some very hands-on service and community engagement work to help students, faculty, and staff learn more about diversity-related topics, and also to have a meaningful impact in the region as a whole. So I definitely hope you all will take us up on some of those offers and try to plug in as well. Any other questions? Any other thoughts, feedback, comments from the group?
Is that link that I just shared, is that the link to
That's
the process?
The SERVS platform.
Yeah.
Yep.
Has there been any conversation in terms of maybe our 10, 20 classes, like encouraging all the students to at least register for that and check it out?
We are, yes. That is a great question. My apologies for cutting you off. That is a great question. Yes, so we are actually in conversations right now, not only in regards to 1020, but actually in regards to preview and orientations as well, about how we ensure that every new student that starts to enter into the Buccaneer family at some capacity, civic engagement, community engaged learning between the QEP, between our office, it touches everybody's hands a little bit, right? It crosses everyone's desk and everybody's at least introduced to it on somewhat of a broad level. But serves is definitely a piece of that component as well. One of the items that we're working on is ensuring that either through as a part of preview, orientation, or 1020, that every ETSU student will get a chance to log into the ETSU Serves platform for the first time and at least kind of get a visualization of how it works, how to find an opportunity, and how to sign up for those opportunities. So great question. Yes, we're working on it. And I appreciate the support. Any other feedback questions, Kim?
Well, Nathan, as you're saying that stuff, I was thinking about Bucks Academy and what you were just saying about making sure that those students that are coming in here at the beginning of July know all about this stuff too. That's one of the big advantages of having them come that early too, is to help them. So
Absolutely.
make sure that gets.
Very good. Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you. Any other thoughts, feedback? I know we got some diverse folks on the screen from all different parts of campus in terms of offices and departments and divisions. Any other questions? Well, with that, if there aren't any other questions, I shared my information. Please feel free to reach out to me. Again, if you want to chat about one of these topics more specifically, I'm going to drop my email one more time into the chat as well. Please reach out. Happy to find a one-on-one time to chat through some of these and talk about next steps. But I really appreciate your all's time. And then I guess, Kim, Chastity, do y'all have anything to close out or?
Thank you again, Nathan. This was a wonderful session. If everyone could please pay attention to the chat and complete the evaluation. This allows us to plan and prepare for future lunch and learn sessions. Also want to remind everyone that Kaya Hudgens-Smith will be with us next month. On Tuesday, July 18th, she will be talking about intersectionality. So again, thank you to Nathan and Joy. This was a wonderful session. Hope everyone has a wonderful day.